We just relaunched our newsletter. If you haven't already, please go to dataskeptic.com, scroll down just a little bit till you see the newsletter sign up box and put your email in there. Every day the show comes out, we send an email that has the guest bio so you can get some advanced background on what they're up to. There's going to be giveaways and behind the scenes material, all original stuff, not just random data science links. It's data skeptic content. So please go over there and sign up if that's interesting to you. Not to be confused with the work we covered 2 episodes ago, today we revisit the topic of Amazon Alexa speakers. When you ask it to put something in your cart or to purchase something for you, how does it decide which product? Only the employees of Amazon know for sure. But our guests today achieve a peek behind the curtain through their research. As it turns out, the item that ends up in your cart might not be the one you're expecting.
So hi, I'm Abhishek and I'm currently a PhD student at Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, India. And I'm currently working with Professor Saptarshi Ghosh and Animesh Mukherjee. And my research interests lie in auditing different algorithmic systems, and especially my interests are in fairness and bias in machine learning systems.
So hello everyone, I am Saptarshi Ghosh. I am an assistant professor at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. Our research interests are also similar. So I research on the algorithmic bias and fairness, especially we investigate the bias in algorithmic systems, and also I do text processing on social media text and legal text.
Well, these topics of fairness and algorithmic auditing, they're not new, but they're, in the grand scheme of things, they're relatively new. Would you mind giving an overview? What does it mean to be interested in fairness and auditing, and how do you study these things?
So fairness in machine learning is no new concept, as you said. Basically, it started with fairness in classification, with, let's say, the use case being, let's say, hiring. So when someone is hiring a few candidates, these algorithms are basically trained on some of the data which are historical. And these might actually contain some of the pre-existing prejudices which are there in the society. And when these are trained on these systems, what happens is these algorithms sometimes have the potential to exacerbate these patterns or the prejudice that they learn from the data. And what algorithmic fairness essentially does, or essentially aims at doing, is basically to reduce or to mitigate such patterns to exacerbate in the output side. That is basically the entire goal of algorithmic bias and fairness. So we want to have fairer decision outcomes for these systems. Of course, there are many definitions of what fairness is, but I think in the interest of time, I should not go into the very details of all these things. Coming to the auditing part, this is a part of this entire broad area of algorithmic fairness, where we are actually studying different algorithms and the harms that they may actually possess for the different stakeholders who are interacting with such algorithms. For example, let's say in e-commerce platform, if say there are the search recommender algorithms, we are trying to see how these algorithms affect the different stakeholders which are at play, say the customers and the sellers.
Also, one clarification that would come up again and again in this discussion, that the people who design these algorithms, it is not that they are bad people or they have nefarious objectives to make the algorithms biased. No. Often the bias in the algorithms come as a kind of side effect. So while the algorithm is being trained to do something useful, it picks up the bias in the data as a side effect.
Yeah, those biases, they're sort of inherited. Like when people hear the example of ask it, male is to doctor as female is to blank, and it comes back with nurse. I don't think anyone likes that result unless there's some comic book villain, who's like an anti-feminist. That's a bad result, everyone agrees. Is it the responsibility of the machine learning engineer to be finding these things and getting rid of them? Or should it work more like software, where sometimes we have a developer and a QA engineer, and they're sort of the code writer and the code checker? What do you think is the right team structure for getting rid of these inherited biases?
While designing an algorithm, no one can foresee what sort of biases that these algorithms may actually come up with. Earlier, what used to happen is that they have gotten an algorithm and now it needs to be tested, but now because of the awareness, even mitigation of bias is actually an important part of the entire development as well. Like where these algorithms will be deployed, or which applications, or which are the people who will be affected, all these things are now getting into consideration. Actually, recently Microsoft actually started a blog post saying what are the different steps that they are taking in the product development phase for responsible AI. That is actually an interesting read as well.
Well, studying bias in language models that you mentioned, I've seen some good papers on that, but all of those researchers have the benefit of having the language model, right? You can download the file and you can query against it. How can you do these sorts of efforts in a situation like Alexa, where you don't have access to the private source code of Amazon?
If we consider this field of algorithmic auditing, so as you mentioned, like let's say if I have the language model and I can do several tasks over it, this sort of an audit basically falls under the category which is code audit, where you have the access to the source codes and all these things. But the kind of audit that we are doing in our line of work is basically scraping audit. If we purchase an Alexa and we can actually give it some queries, like let's say in our case, we gave it a few e-commerce search queries, and then we saw what are the responses coming from Alexa, and based on that we tried to kind of see what are the different problems that actually can arise due to the way the responses are actually given to a common man.
Well, prior to getting into the actual experimental phase, did you have any hypotheses going in, or was it purely an exploratory exercise?
Actually, the course of this project was actually interesting. So we are actually doing a line of work where we are actually investigating biases, several sort of biases in the information retrieval algorithms which are deployed in e-commerce marketplaces. We basically wanted to go through the search algorithm. So our first work was basically on biases which can actually be induced by the related item recommendation on Amazon marketplace. And this work actually got accepted in FACT 2021. Next thing which we actually had planned is we should visit search algorithms as well, because search and recommendation are basically the two pivotal pillars in any e-commerce marketplace. When we go to the search website of say Amazon and you do a search, let's say backpack, so a number of products will come up, and what we saw is that there are several badges which are being given to several products like Amazon's Choice, bestseller, and all these things. We got basically intrigued by this Amazon's Choice. What is this Amazon's Choice badge that they are showcasing here? And what we understood is historically Amazon's Choice badge was basically meant to assist a voice assistant. So basically when I search for a query, let's say backpack, and there is a certain product which is getting this Amazon's Choice badge for this particular query, that particular assignment is in turn actually assisting the voice assistant, which is Alexa, to select a product for when a customer asks the query, say via a smart speaker. So we actually got intrigued by this detail and how this actually has evolved, and we wanted to test some things out, like how this search through Alexa, like how does it actually feel? And we started doing some search on the basis of that, and this paper is basically an outcome of this entire process.
So Kyle, the question you asked, that whether we start with a preconceived notion of bias or whether we just explore, that is actually a very good question. So we researchers usually prefer to start without any biases of our own that about such a system. However, the Amazon in e-commerce marketplace, actually there has been a lot of complaints about Amazon and some of the algorithms that it deploys. So we have seen in various countries like US, Europe, India, that many merchants or many sellers who sell on Amazon, they complain about several double standards being used by Amazon. But because of these, lot of blog posts are written, lot of even news articles come up. So you might have also heard of antitrust investigations being carried out over Amazon in US and Europe. So there is a big section of stakeholders of Amazon who feel that Amazon is doing something which might not be completely ethical, like say giving higher priority to certain products or sellers with whom they are affiliated.
Cyber criminals are evolving. Their techniques and tactics are more advanced, intricate, and dangerous than ever before. Industries and governments around the world are fighting back, unveiling new regulations meant to better protect data against this rising threat. Today, the world of cybersecurity compliance is a complex one, and understanding the requirements your organization must adhere to can be a daunting task. But not when the pack has your back. Arctic Wolf, the leader in security operations, is on a mission to end cyber risk by giving organizations the protection, information, and confidence they need to protect their people, technology, and data. Their new interactive compliance portal helps you discover the regulations in your region and industry and start the journey towards achieving and maintaining compliance. Visit arcticwolf.com/skeptic to take your first step. That's arcticwolf.com/skeptic. Thanks to our sponsor BB Edit from Bare Bones Software. If you're a Mac user and you have any need whatsoever for a text editor, which, let's face it, that's got to be all of us, you have got to check out BB Edit. BB Edit 14 provides Mac users the most powerful, professional-grade text editor around. It's known as capable and rock solid, and can process files that are large enough to bring other editors to their knees. This tool's been beloved for over 25 years, and I can understand why. If I'm just typing up some simple hello world, I guess any text editor will do. But when I really get into the weeds and need to do some data processing, maybe I've got a big messy file, I need to find all the non-ASCII characters and remove them, BB Edit's there for me. It has best-of-breed multi-file search and replace and great scripting support for text transformations. There's a whole menu of text transformations that you'll find handy. If you're a serious data scientist or software engineer, you're going to bump into situations where you need a powerful text editor. So download and try BB Edit today. You can get it at www.barebones.com. See how much your productivity can increase. barebones.com and download BB Edit.
But of course, these are like allegations and there is no proof as such. So, but all these allegations gave us further motivation to study these algorithms, like what Abhishek was telling. We are doing quite a series of works on different algorithms being that are deployed by Amazon.
So basically in these e-commerce marketplaces, so earlier what used to happen is that this really was a marketplace. So Amazon began, it's the sole seller on its platform, and then they opened up the marketplace to several third-party sellers who started selling on Amazon. Now in the due course of time, Amazon also started producing or manufacturing some products which we refer to as private label products. Like if you have heard of brands such as Amazon Basics, Solimo, Presto, and several things like that. These are basically some of the brands which are affiliated to Amazon, and there were multiple media articles from Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Reuters, etc., where they are basically showing with some anecdotal evidences that Amazon might actually be pushing or promoting their private label products over, let's say, several other third-party products which are competing against them on the same marketplace. And that is basically the bottom line, where this new notion of fairness, which we have actually been discussing over the series of our papers. So if you consider the standard notion of fairness is in predictive analytics, like let's say classification, etc., this is very different from that flavor of fairness. This is basically where we are saying that, okay, the algorithmic fairness literature has studied the repercussions of algorithms for different stakeholders. However, they have actually forgotten the important thing which is sitting between all the stakeholders, which is the platform. So how the platform and the spatial relationships, like let's say the private label thing that I told, can actually have some effect on the downstream, let's say the openness or the fairness of the entire marketplace. How does that affect it? There are several media articles, and of course, like in US, there have been a number of antitrust hearings where Amazon has been questioned. And recently, there was an article by Leon Yin where they have actually shown that how Amazon private label products are being promoted in the top of the search results. That is also backed up by some of the internal documents which Reuters found in India as well. These are some of the things which have been prevalent in the different media houses or the news articles, as well as Saptarshi was mentioning that Amazon is actually facing antitrust issues based on these things in not only United States but also in India and European Union as well.
Well, when it comes to something like the fairness of the platform and the prevalence of Amazon Basic brands, if I were asked to defend Amazon, I guess maybe I could say we have a ranking algorithm at Amazon, and it includes, we can't tell you what it is, it's our secret, of course, but a large portion of it is based on conversion rate or sales, and it just so happens that Amazon Basics sells really well, so it is fair. Is that sufficient, or can we learn anything more than that?
Actually, there is a lot more to learn than that. Let me just give an example of one of the earlier papers that I was referring to, let's say the related item recommendation paper. In that paper, we were basically trying to understand this notion of exposure bias, or let's say in simple terms, how strongly Amazon is actually promoting its private label products in two different recommendation networks which exist on Amazon. So if you go on Amazon product pages, so you can actually see several carousels which are actually sponsored product advertisements. In the product page, they show some sponsored related item recommendations. They also show some of the organic recommendation, related item recommendations. However, in the sponsored recommendation, in our data set that we collected, we actually found that private label products were recommended from almost 50% of all the entire product set that we have, whereas the counter number was 15% merely for the organic recommendation. So to answer your initial question that can this actually be an artifact of customers preferring or consuming these products more and more, it's not what I am saying, rather it's what Amazon's own organic recommendation sets that we found, that is what is saying that okay, that might actually not be the case.
Yeah, we're going to have links to that in the show notes as well. I hope listeners will read that paper as well. But today we're going to focus on your guys' work with voice, and specifically the Alexa speaker. I've talked to a few people, friends of mine, who have just anecdotal stories, but stories about spooky things happening. You know, like someone mentioned they wanted a banana and then they saw an ad for a banana on their computer. And it's hard to say if this could be real. Certainly the modern technology could link these things. Amazon could eavesdrop on us and use that for advertising. It's more a question of, do they actually do that? And they're a private system, so we don't have a lot of transparency. What can we do to try and audit these systems and understand what they're doing?
The concern that you are basically highlighting in the question is more towards the privacy issues that are surrounding these smart speakers. So we actually put them in our house, in our living room, and all sorts of places, but we actually don't know when we actually press the silent button on the top of the Amazon Echo, does it actually not record anything or does it record anything? Now, I do not have a concrete answer to that, but I can surely reflect upon how we devised our experimental setup to audit the algorithm, the search algorithm at least, which is underlying Alexa. Many of us are basically acquainted with e-commerce search. We all go to Amazon.com and say search for a backpack or a hiking backpack before a hike and all these things. And when we do that, a set of products actually appear 306 to be exact actually, and that set of product actually appear in a matrix fashion or in a vertical fashion where we can actually see the product being ranked, and we also see some of the metadata like what are the price, what are the brands, and all these stuffs. So we are making an informed decision about what product we want to purchase given the query. In a sense, the autonomy is with the customer itself. Contrast that to, let's say, shopping through a smart speaker like Amazon Echo Dot, which is powered by, of course, Alexa. There, when you search, like basically you would have to ask like, Alexa, can you buy me a, say, backpack? So what will happen is Alexa will provide you the details of a particular product that Alexa judges or decides to be the most relevant at this point of time to you. It will say some things like, okay, Amazon's choice is Adidas so and so, or Amazon Basics so and so, and then it will give you several other details, and Alexa follows this by adding this particular product to the customer's cart. Now what happens here is basically, if you contrast this with the traditional setup or the desktop search setup that I was mentioning, here the autonomy is not necessarily with the customer. In fact, it is not at all with the customer, and in fact it is the Alexa system that is basically making the decision of which product this is actually good for the customer, and it is adding the same to the cart. That's how we collected data set for 14 days for different queries, and that was the entire pipeline that we devised to proceed further in our quest to understand the interpretations and the fairness concerns which may arise.
There's a fair amount of randomness in this process. What ads, even two people, two identical brand new machines could see slightly different results. Budgets could run out, or maybe one advertiser is targeting Alexa, not desktop, or vice versa. So there's just kind of a lot of potential noise here. Can you talk about, I guess, what's a control group and what your test groups are?
So Kyle, the point you are making that different users can see different results, that is quite known. That is what is called personalization. But here we are talking about the same user at the same point of time using two different mediums. So let's say a desktop search versus voice search. Then is it intuitive that the results should be different? Maybe not. We try to do these studies with as much rigor as possible, but then there are a lot of factors which we may have no way of knowing. So you are right. Like if certain companies are there which have specifically told Amazon that we do not want to target people who use voice search, then there is no way of us knowing them. But at least we have not found any evidence to suggest that those things are there. But sure, I think we should accept that. Those kind of factors, it's not possible for us to take into account.
Yeah, but there has to be a plausible mechanism too, and if there aren't any relevant hypotheses, then what could it be, right?
Yeah, so we are observing certain differences, which Abhishek will go into details, and we are also seeing that what the customers understand is not the same as what is happening out there, and that is a big red flag. We all are, I think, customers of Amazon, but if what is there we cannot explain, or what we expect, what is happening there is a big difference between the two, then I think that needs to be at least known to people. So we actually tested out that what kind of expectations people have when they hear or from, say, a search engine like, say, Amazon, and whether those expectations are matching with what is actually happening out there.
What are the average users expecting? These are new technologies. What do people think is going on in the background?
As I was mentioning, that customers are very, very conversant with, say, traditional systems like desktop search, and they are not so with the Alexa-based search. In its response, Alexa actually gives us some brief explanations about why it's selecting a particular product. Like these explanations, the two most prevalent explanations that we found in our data set is Amazon's choice and a top result. So Alexa will say that Amazon's choice for this query is so and so, and it is at this price, it will be delivered by this, and I am adding this to your cart. Or it will say a top result for this query is so and so, and I will add it to your cart. Let's pick up the easier example over here, a top result. So let me ask you this question. When someone says it is a top result, where do you expect to see this particular product on your search result? Let's say if you are using the desktop search, where do you expect that product to appear?
Well, it's already kind of a sneaky phrase. It didn't say the top result, it said a top result. So at a minimum, I would think top 3 or something like that.
Exactly. It says a top result. What we actually found that in more than 60% cases, many of the customers have the expectation that when Alexa says it's a top result, they had the expectation it is the top result. That means it should come from position 1 and nowhere else. We conducted a survey where we asked people that, okay, where do you expect such a product to appear? And they said position 1 is where we expect this particular product to appear. And what we saw is that in only 19% cases, the product actually appears in the top of the search result. In the rest of the 81% cases, it does not appear at the top position or position 1 per se. Even further worryingly, when the explanation is a top result, we found that in 25% cases, the product actually did not even appear in the first page of the search result, which was even more alarming. Like as you mentioned, if we go with the semantics, a top result might actually be, let's say, position 1, position 2, position 3, those are all top positions, right? But if Amazon shows 48 products on the first page and a particular product that Alexa is explaining to be a top result is not appearing among the top 48, then that is a concern. So the coherence is basically missing of what Amazon's own search engine result is showing to a customer on the desktop at the very same instance. It's basically differing on the other mode of interaction.
Could you elaborate more on the survey? What kind of questions did the participants answer, and describe a little bit about the aggregate of the results?
So as during the data collection, we were collecting these two sets of results for the same query, one coming from Amazon Alexa and the other coming from the desktop search. We selected several products, and for each of these queries, basically what we did is we showed the top organic result that Amazon search ranking system provided, and we also showed the respondents the product which was chosen to add to cart by Alexa. The customers are now seeing both the products as well as their metadata, and then they are being asked which of these products would you actually prefer to purchase. Would you like to purchase the product which was added to cart by Alexa, or the one which was added which is the top of the organic search result? And of course the two options were anonymized so that the customers do not have an idea that which result is coming from which system. And then we asked them to give their preferences, and there we actually found that in 73% cases the customers are actually preferring the product which is appearing at the top of the organic search result on desktop search of Amazon to the products which was added to cart by Alexa. There is actually a problem with respect to the customer satisfaction as well, because many customers are actually opting for several other products than the product which was added to cart by Alexa. Then we also asked them about why do they prefer the way they prefer. There they actually gave a bunch of reasonings, like let's say brands, price being lower, and all these things they actually said. And if you go through the paper, the arguments and the observations are actually more elaborately written. That is one of the most significant findings in the work as well.
I know you can't necessarily know without being in Amazon, but do you think there could be a possibility it's like a technical glitch? For example, maybe to appear on Alexa, you have to have some special metadata field populated, and the first 47 vendors failed to populate that, and that's why a top became number 48 or something. Can you learn anything from inspecting the results?
You certainly saw the funny side to it. But yeah, as much as you are intrigued by this result and surprised by this observation, we were too. Like, we actually thought that, okay, there is something wrong which we are doing. It cannot be the case that 25% of the cases this product is not even appearing on the first page. So what we actually hypothesized that it might be due to the randomness. Like, let's say there is some random perturbation in the search result which might have actually caused this. And to check that again, we actually collected data for 100 queries for the next 14 days. To our surprise, the observations that we had over that one snapshot which I was referring to, the similar qualitatively very similar observations we actually found in all the 14 temporal snapshots that we had. Although this does not explain the reason why this might actually be happening, but it actually removed the hypothesis that we at least had, that it might be due to randomness, or this might be a random coincidence that we are observing this.
Well, I'm curious then, as you look through the results and frame it from the context of unfairness, is there any maliciousness that can be read into this? Is it that Amazon tends to select their own brands more often, or is it just seemingly random in some sense?
We actually did not investigate the kind of unfairness that you are talking about, like the self-promotion sort of things. The unfairness that we investigated in this particular paper, the publication that we have, is basically where we are basically mentioning that, okay, Alexa is selecting this one particular product. There is a lack of autonomy for customers. Now, what can actually happen is that there can be a case where there is a non-selection of the most relevant product. Now, when Amazon ranks these products, it not only ranks the products, but also it ranks the associated sellers. Getting to the top of the search result is basically a question of sales and revenue and opportunity for many of the sellers who are selling on Amazon. We basically had the fairness concern that we are showing in this particular paper is that if there is a non-selection of the most relevant product, this can be unfair to two parties, to both sellers as well as the customers. Like in case of the sellers, the most relevant seller, so basically someone has toiled hard to get to the top organic position, however he or she is not getting his due benefit or the opportunity to sell. And from the customer side, when you see, it is basically the fact that while there are several other more relevant options there, the particular customer is basically being steered or nudged to a potentially less relevant product. And we actually conducted a survey to establish that particular thing as well.
Well, if, as you say, it's not fair for the seller or the buyer, can I trust it's at least in favor of the platform itself?
The basic numbers which are not there in this paper, so I won't be getting too much into it, but some of the observations that we had is that there are several links or affiliations of some of the parties, like let's say the seller or the product. In some cases there were several special relationships. We consider the number of times a particular item is recommended is to be, let's say, a benefit that this particular product is getting. Okay. Now, let's say there are several private label products and there are several third-party products. By private label, I mean some products which is basically Amazon Basics or Presto or Solimo or things like that. And for third-party product, let's say these other third-party brands which whose products are also sold on Amazon. Now, what we found is that the average number of times an Amazon private label product was recommended was 45 times. And the average number of times a third-party product was recommended was 34 times, which is okay. Like, although there is a higher number for Amazon private label products, but at least these are comparable. 34 plays with 45. But when you contrast that with the sponsored recommendations, like the sponsored related item carousel that I was referring to, the average in degree or the average times an Amazon private label gets recommended was skyrocketing to 164, whereas the number is 52 for third parties, which is almost thrice as much as any of the third party products. So in the umbrella of the sponsored related item recommendation, there was some significantly more promotion of the private label, Amazon private label product. That is what we found in that particular work. And as I was referring to another number which I threw at you in organic setup, 15% from 15% third party products or different products on the platform, you could go to a private label product. But in sponsored, it is almost 50% or even more. So yeah, that basically paints the picture of how the self promotion was going on in that sponsored recommendation.
Well, I'm certain Amazon could obviously be doing more for transparency, or maybe you're going to tell me they do absolutely zero for transparency. What's the current state of things, and how would you like to see it change?
No, I would not say that Amazon does not do anything regarding this. So Amazon actually has done several papers which Amazon Research publishes, actually try to bring in some of the things, some of the improvements that can actually mitigate some of these issues. So in the context of the current work on Amazon Alexa, if I may say so, the kind of explanations that Amazon is providing right now are very, let's put it this way, it is uninformative. A proper explanation should actually give some insight to how a particular decision is basically made. Or let's say it helps the users to make good decisions, and it brings some confidence or trust in the customer's perspective. Now, Amazon actually has been, I have seen a particular paper actually in Cheer 2022, where they are basically talking about some point-wise and pair-wise explanations which can further improve on the state of the art that they have, saying Amazon's choice is this and this, whereas in the improvements that they're trying to do is basically they will also analyze some of the reviews that are there, and they will try to say in point-wise, basically they will say, okay, this is a very strong review that one of the customer who has used this particular product has given. Or let's say in pair-wise thing, they will basically contrast this with another top search result and say that, okay, this particular product is at this price and there are these reviews, like let's say if it is a backpack, let's say one review actually says that, oh, this backpack actually comes with a rain cover and it is more durable. However, for the other top result, let's say the reviews are there is a negative review like, oh, this does not come with a rain cover and this is not, maybe the fabrics are not that good and all these things. So they can actually do a comparative sort of a thing and give you some more information. So this sort of things are actually going on, which is basically what Amazon is trying to actually improve its own explanations, and that will actually try to bring up some more transparency and interpretability into the system. So I would never say that Amazon is not doing something, but the effects in the end products has not been seen. That is the current state, and of course, like, hopefully this will change and they will actually bring in those changes which they are proposing or they are doing the research on. They can actually bring in some of the changes to the products that they are outletting to the marketplace, so that can be useful for the regular customers.
Well, I'm curious to hear where your research is going next. We talked about one interesting project and touched on several more. What's coming down the pipe?
So as you must be knowing that Amazon ecosystem itself is very huge, and there are several other algorithms which are of interest to us as well, and we are doing several investigations in those aspects, and not only some of the algorithmic mediations but also some of the design choices, like let's say how the different information is being shown on Amazon. Even that can also cause or nudge people towards making several choices. So we are actually trying to understand all these different nuances and the interplay between these things. So that is the broad idea or the broad research agenda that we have. We also intend to, like, given, so let's say the two projects that we discussed and the ones that we are currently doing is basically trying to showcase some of the problems. Now, of course, we always say that to basically improve a system, we need to first acknowledge that there is some problem, and then the next step is basically to mitigate some of those problems. And we are also trying to do some mitigation, like trying to develop mitigation strategies which may actually help mitigating some of these issues in the long term as well.
Well, is there anywhere listeners can follow you both online?
I am on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Abhishek ADASH 0193.
Thank you both for coming on and taking the time to talk about your work.
Thank you,
thanks.
Kyle, for this opportunity to present our work to a larger audience.
That concludes this installment of Data Skeptic Ad Tech. That's also the last bit for this season on the Amazon topic, I promise. Next week, we move on to podcast advertising. And while this is not totally representative of our discussion, here is the most sensational pull quote I could find from that upcoming interview.
Some people go out and they hire companies that have click farms. If you watch Silicon Valley, if you're a fan of that, there was one scene where they showed where Jared had hired a click farm to pump their numbers up. Some people do that. Oftentimes, we can figure that out and we can filter that out. And we know which IP addresses some of those come from out overseas, and we filter that stuff out. People absolutely do try to do that. We've seen people do that and say, hey, we want to be part of an ad campaign. And we look at their numbers and go, something's not quite right. Why are all these downloads coming from a browser? And we track it down and realize, they're bogus numbers.
That's next week on Data Skeptic Ad Tech.